I challenge these ufologists to debunk me, discover my identity. If they really believe that the alien interview footage is a hoax, prove it. Show where it was faked. If they believe that the alien in that footage is a puppet, prove it. Find the puppet maker. If they believe that I am a hoaxer, prove it. Discover my real identity. As the Bible thumpers say, the end times are upon us.
The end of the world?
The end of the world. Après moi le déluge. Le déluge solaire.
Somewhere you said time may be running out for humanity, so I'm wondering if you think that's true.
Well, that's a really deep question. You do like to ask deep questions. I appreciate that. It's so glad you're doing this book. Wow, it's going to be a great book.
Thank you.
And most people don't ask you such thoughtful and deep questions, and they're not nearly as prepared as you are. So getting back to your question, would you repeat it?
You said time may be running out for humanity, but then you said you're optimistic, so I'm not sure what you're thinking.
In an extreme case, for example, we could annihilate large segments of the world, including ourselves, through nuclear war, or promoting excessive climate change, and associated disruption of, quote, civilization, and people literally tearing on each other, having us revert to our potential primal instincts. However, and so this could really hurt the planet and hurt our species. However, is it a, quote, end to our species? Well, and is it even an end to the Earth? It depends upon your perspective. See, if you take a broader perspective, that there is no death, there's only transformation.
Yeah.
The dinosaurs are not extinct. They are extinct in physical form on the Earth, but in the greater living energy universe, they're not extinct. As long as photons exist, as long as information and energy exists, they, in their essence, have continued to exist and may be, quote, evolving. We have a very limited view as to what all of this means, and that's part of why I say this has been in the Copernican revolution, because if you really think about what it would mean that there is, for example, there's no death, there's only transformation, and that you can have both recycling and re-opportunities, you end up becoming more hopeful both for the species and the universe, even if we engage in tremendous self-destruction and cause each other tremendous pain and suffering. On one hand, in terms of the short-term material, yes, I'm very concerned. But from a larger, bigger picture, I keep asking myself the question, well, is there some, quote, greater purpose for this? Are we, so to speak, at a fork in the road? What we're about to do tomorrow is never been done in the history of science. And it has never been the case before that a group of pioneering mediums are teaming together with a group of scientists in a university that really believes in the idea that any important question that is meaningful for people should be asked in an open fashion. Tomorrow we are going to have a marathon. In the morning we are going to do the naturalistic experiment. It is a mediumship demonstration experiment. Demonstration means we are not addressing the how it works. We are addressing to what extent does it, quote, work. During the experiment, you will be recording your electrocardiogram, your heart waves, and your electroencephalogram, or your brain waves.
What is that?
That increases the conductivity. These data might tell us something about how a medium's heart and brain are connecting with the sitters during a reading. For sometime between 10 and 15 minutes, you and this person will sit together and you will do whatever you do in your own way.
Don't start doing anything yet because
We've added these controls to the experiment to ensure that you and the subject have never met. There will be no eye contact, so a screen will separate you. The sitter will give you only yes or no answers. You will share no information with the other mediums.
don't share a word of anything until the entire thing is over.
Now, during the reading, the sitter will make subjective judgments rating the extent to which they personally feel that you are making a recognizable contact with a specific deceased loved one. We have had quite a day today. Just to review what happened, there were 6 people that were listed as possible visitors. Every one of them was observed at least once. In addition to these 6, 8 people and 1 dog came through. The mediums were virtually identical in their average performance. This graph shows the average ratings over the 5 mediums for each of the 6 deceased people that the sitter was expecting to possibly be there. The sun came through, you will see, virtually a 5, which means every single person received information about the sun. Preliminary analyses of the heart-brain data indicate that the medium's brain is registering the subject's heart, while the medium's heart is disconnecting with the subject's heart. These findings are consistent with the hypothesis that during a reading, the medium is disconnecting from the sitter and possibly connecting with the deceased. This experiment does not tell us how this phenomenon occurs. What it does strongly suggest, to put it mildly, is that there is a phenomenon, and that it can be replicated, and that it has very deep significance. We hope this is a beginning, a new beginning for this work. There are observatories and there's telescopes and everything else. And
So you've got nothing anywhere else?
Right, there's nowhere else. I have confessed the most important part of this is that I was taking you to the place where they have the largest solar observatory in the world, the largest sun telescope in the world. And what you do not realize is, because we were only talking about this on the way up, that both of us have a passion for astronomy.
Yes.
Both of us have a passion for the sun. You have a telescope that you've looked at in the sun, and that video camera that I'm using to make these photographs, which was given to me as a gift, I purchased a special solar lens so I could take pictures of the sun with that camera.
To tell you the truth, I was, as a technical term, I was quote blown away by the accuracy. I was completely surprised. This experiment involved Christopher going to sleep each night and then dreaming about where he would be taken the next day. And he would record his dreams. All of this was recorded on digital videotape.
Yep.
And then the information, which was held in secret envelopes that were randomly sorted and were kept in California. An envelope would be opened in California, and I would be told for the first time where we were going.
Right.
So, at the time that this information was being received, of course, the truth was I had no idea where we were going to go on any given day. The same was with Christopher. And day after day, he received highly specific information that was related to the process of going to the site, information at the site, and then continued information for the rest of the day, even though the experiment was, so to speak, officially completed.
So in other words, he had lucid, logical, cogent dreams that the night before he was taken to a secret location of those locations. He saw in advance where he couldn't possibly have known consciously where he was going to be taken.
That's correct. Now also, you should understand that if he had got, for example, even 5 out of 10 correct, it would have been extraordinary. And he was expecting that if he did well, that's what would happen. It just so happens that he was, quote, in the zone, you might say. He was very motivated, as was I, to push his talent to the extreme. That he was actually 10 out of 10.
10 out of 10. What the heck is going on?
Well, of course, the truth is that nobody knows. However, it has been long known, actually throughout recorded history, that certain individuals have what are called precognitive dreams. That is, they can, quote, see the future. And the question has been, are they, quote, if you would, reading the minds of people who are potentially perpetrating a crime, are they, quote, tapping into, information in the universe about past, present, and future in some sort of way? Or are they actually receiving intelligent assistance from people who have died, as well as more highly intelligent sources that would provide this information? And by the way, at this point, all the hypotheses are plausible.
The work that I do involves technology transfer, and technology transfer is the office that he works in. And he is one of the few technology transfer people in the country, I think at any university, whose interests are broad enough to address extraordinary kinds of technologies. And the research that we do, for example, on what's called the soul phone, on developing spirit communication technology, certainly falls within that arena. And he, when we were working on that particular area, he said, I have met this group of people who are doing extraordinary work. And they are doing work that's profoundly important for humanity, and they're evidence-based. They really care about bridging science and spirituality. In fact, they even see business as a spiritual practice, a spiritual path. And so he said, maybe you could help them in their quest for discovering what's real about what they're doing. And so after a bit of time, I was introduced to Clayton and Jeff and some of their other members, and I became, I was to say, literally in awe of their commitment to truth-seeking and following the evidence where it leads. And that's how it started.
There's a coincidence, by the way. I met Neil Donald Walsh, and I should explain that a synchronicity that connects us is that his original publisher was a publisher called Hampton Roads Press. And I'm not sure whether you remember those days, which was the Art Bell days.
Yep.
Publishing in this area. And they also were the publisher of the Living Energy Universe, which was my first book for the general public and my first connection with Art Bell. So it's a long history. But I have to confess that that for individuals who are interested in these kinds of questions, another advantage of my experience of customers who become involved with FOSD is that they end up joining a community of individuals who care about these kinds of higher issues and higher values and higher goals. And so although they may have difficulty, expressing these within their own families, for example, or others who may be skeptical, there's a place where they have the freedom to explore these things, and it's not science versus spirituality or science versus consciousness. Sort of mainstream. Energy medicine, which of course is now bridging into the alternative medicine area, and a little bit of what you might call spiritual medicine, or the spirituality side of psychology and health.
So, in a way, then, you were already slipping out of the mainstream a little bit anyway.
Absolutely. In fact, when we had created this Human Energy Systems Laboratory, it was really going from my background actually in electrical engineering and taking it into contemporary science. In fact, we always talk about that I do work on using mainstream methods to address frontier questions. But addressing the question of life after life, of course, was way off the mark from where I had been before.
Way off. It is, however, in my opinion, the biggest question that all of us have, period. I mean, that's it. It's the big one. What could be bigger than that? I mean, even aliens.
I think the only question that's actually bigger than this one, which is actually going to be the topic of the next book that I'm writing, is the topic of whether there's some sort of design or plan to the universe, and whether or not we
can see the future of the universe. That, by the way, though, if you survive, if consciousness in some form that we can recognize and talk about survives death, then I would think the answer to that question will be apparent at death.
Yes. In fact, the research on the afterlife actually points us to the idea of something bigger than all of us, of course. So it really does take us there. But I think that for most people, the number one question is this the end? Is it ashes to ashes, dust to dust? Or is this really just part of the beginning, so to speak? Many of us had the, I might call it a privilege, as horrible as it was, to witness 9/11 happening as it was occurring. And what millions and millions of people saw and said was, they couldn't believe what they were seeing.
With respect first to the 9/11 disaster, Doctor, you say you experienced that as it occurred. In what sense?
Well, I was awoken in the morning,
right,
at 6:15 Tucson time,
right,
which was 8:15 New York time, and I was told that something horrible was happening and I should turn on the television.
right.
So of course, I turned on the television, and I saw the first tower burning, and I couldn't believe it. And of course, I turned the channels to see whether there was some mistake, and virtually all the channels were showing this. And then I saw this second plane crashing into the building. And at this point, I couldn't imagine that two planes in a short period of time could somehow crash into this building. Certainly not deliberately. It didn't make any sense to me. I then got out of bed. I went and I made some coffee. I went into another room and turned on the television set. I received another phone call. And while I was on this phone, and it's important about who this phone call was from, I'll tell you in a second. While I'm on the phone with this person, I see the first building collapsing. And I realize that for the first time in my life, I'm literally witnessing, as are millions of other people, thousands of people dying.
Yes.
Thousands of people dying.
A few days into the Arizona experiment officially taking place, Christopher reported in the bar at the hotel, so multiple people heard this, that he had a nightmare. And he described this nightmare that he saw planes were crashing into tall buildings and that thousands of people were dying. And frankly, I forgot about it. It wasn't part of the experiment. But when Christopher went home, he continued to have these dreams, and they continued to develop. And then 2 or 3 days later, 9/11 occurs. When that happened, I was personally, if you would, traumatized, not just by the horrific nature of the event, but that someone that I knew who came to me for help was getting information that if we had been able to know about it ahead of time, could have potentially prevented it. We are at a precipice in terms of our lives on this planet. We are facing greater challenges than maybe at any time in our species' history. We can't wait another 20 years or another 30 years to awaken to this possibility if there's an opportunity for us to get a clear answer.
I live my life feeling gratitude and blessings. And most scientists have not had the privilege and the opportunity to grow in a spiritual way at the same time they were growing as a research scientist. I've been fortunate to be able to do both and to have experience with what called real magic. In fact, I'd say a good 90% of the sculptures and artworks that you see behind me, they all have a story. Most of them have names, and they are reminders of synchronicity and special events that happened in our lives. And that's saying a lot. It's saying other companies like this that wrote this book. This notion of gratitude, it's hard to not to grow in this area and feel ever more thankful for everything, whether it's being able to see or hear, or it's being able to move, or it's being able to think, or the simplest things, let alone the more sophisticated opportunities. And I recently, with special people, well, sometimes I sign my name, I always type out the word blessings, whether it's cheers and blessings, or best blessings, or hugs and blessings, whatever, but it's always blessings. It's that feeling, and I always type it out, so I remember. And I recently took with certain people who know me, I will use an acronym. I'll sign my name EGG, which stands for Eternally Grateful Gary.
Oh, that's wonderful. I like that.
So anyway, it's not that you need to include it or anything, but I'm distracted. The notion of being able to experience gratitude, bridging science and spirituality is very precious.
And I'm very grateful that we've had this time to talk. It's been fascinating and wonderful, and I'm deeply grateful.
Certain individuals,
certain individual,
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 certain individuals, certain individuals, certain individuals, certain individuals, certain individuals, certain individuals, certain individuals,
certain individual,
certain individuals.
certain individual.
Let me just, 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 let me just,
One of them,
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 one of them, one of them,
one of them,
one of them,
one of them,
one of them,
one of them, one of them,
one of them,
one of them.
one of them.
Would you repeat?
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 Would you repeat? Would you repeat? Would you repeat? Would you repeat? Would you repeat? Would you repeat? Would you repeat?
Would you repeat?
Would you repeat?
Would you repeat?
at the same time,
At the same time.
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 at the same time, 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 at the same time,
At the same time.
at the same time,
At the same time.
Last days,
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 last days, last days, last days, last days, last days, last days, last days,
last days,
last days,
last days.
last days.
You,
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 you, you, you, you, you, you, you,
you,
you, you.
information,
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 information, information, information, information, information, information, information,
information,
information,
information.
spiritual,
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 spiritual, spiritual, spiritual, spiritual, spiritual, spiritual,
spiritual,
spiritual, spiritual,
spiritual.